Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here from the Raw Cave, and we have special guest John Ellerman in the studio, who's one of Australia's leading microbiologists. This is video 2 of the 3 that we're making on gut health and bacteria. Check out the first video for more of an introduction to why this is so important for every single human being on this planet. And in this video, we're going to talk more about mums, athletes. We're going to talk about strategies to improve your gut, and also liquids and foods that impact our gut on an everyday basis. So let's get straight into it again. What are some foods and liquids that you find challenging people's gut health and really impacting their digestion?
I think gluten and dairy are ones that challenge a lot of people, and particularly if they're people that have a lot of gut damage done by having dysbiosis, too many bad bugs in their gut. Okay, and dairy is a highly nutritious substance. It's what we all feed our babies, and casein is the gold standard by which all proteins are measured in terms of their nutritional value. Right. But if you've got a whole lot of bugs in your gut that are doing you no good, then a highly nutritious food is not going to help, because it will feed those bad bugs. They'll get a wriggle on and do their thing even more than they did before. Also, if you've got gut damage, as in a leaky gut, then big molecules like casein from dairy and gluten from wheat and so on will go through the wall of the intestine, that's translocate, into the bloodstream and cause issues there by causing the immune system to think it's being invaded by viruses or something like that. So it will then make antibodies to attack these things, and every time you eat that, the whole immune system responds to that substance. It goes into defensive mode. Right. And that inflammation is a major component of what the immune system tries to do first up. You see, it induces that inflammatory response. So those foods, if you've got what we would call a cast iron gut, so in other words, if you were born in 1920 or something like that and had never seen antibiotics, and you had still a good set of bugs in your gut, you could eat just about anything and it wouldn't be bad for you. Right. You know, but these days the situation has changed because so many people have done damage to their microbiome, their gut bugs, to the extent where these foods now are causing them problems because of the gut damage and because of the predominance of bad bugs in their gut. So they're the sort of foods that typically cause problems. They don't cause problems for me because I'm on a symbiotic all the time, a good probiotic, and I think that because I've been taking that for so long, even though I had dysbiosis induced by an antibiotic called Flagyl, nevertheless my gut has been protected by continually feeding in good bugs, and I've never progressed to that stage where I have problems with that, so I can eat dairy till it's coming out of my ears.
Interesting. So you've repaired it to the point that you can now eat
Yes,
those
I
foods.
prevented the damage that would have otherwise been done if I had just let it progress.
I noticed for myself, growing up, my mum's a naturopath, and we never did dairy or gluten. But I remember there were times that I did eat it and I'd get bloating. So what I've noticed by specifically taking a new probiotic is that now when I do, I'm going to eat gluten now and again, and I eat dairy and certain sugars. When I do eat them, there's less reaction or sometimes no reaction.
Yes, it's interesting. I've got a friend who has Crohn's disease, and she's had 6 major operations, 5 of which were chopping bits of her bowel out. Wow. And she had to go on the strongest possible drugs that were imported specially by Liverpool Hospital from America. And they made her so sick that she stopped them and simply stayed off gluten and dairy, which she was off all along anyway. But the doctors said these drugs were necessary to stop her progressing to another operation in 2 years. And well, actually they said even though she's taking them, she'll still have an operation in 2 years. Now, all she did was stop all the drugs, and I'm not advocating people do that without medical advice, but anyway, and all she did was take a dose of this symbiotic that we manufacture in the morning and one in the evening.
Yeah.
5 years later, the doctors are amazed, and they're saying, whatever you're doing, keep doing it.
Yeah.
She doesn't, but she still has to stay off dairy and gluten, because she says now, if she does pig out on gluten, she'll get a pain just in her side here, but at least now she knows what's causing it. Before, it was just pain all the time, no matter what she ate or didn't eat, you know.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so it's a dramatic improvement in that sort of condition.
Do you find, I just lost the question. Anyhow, that'll come back to me.
Yeah.
So, so being around the health community here in Sydney and Australia, I've noticed that a lot of people are taking on gluten-free or dairy-free diets. Do you feel that they're missing out on key nutrition?
Well, that's a good question.
Nutrients?
That is a good question. We are designed to take on all sorts of vegetable material and other things that contain even toxins. Every plant produces toxins to stop things eating it, you see. And we've got a liver that's designed to cope with that and detoxify these substances. Now, I think that, you know, there's lots of foods out there. Of course, our diets have gone to pot in recent years, but that's not enough to account for the gut damage and gut problems that people have. The predominant problem, maybe 80% of the issue, is not diet, and I'm all in favour of good nutrition. It's a motherhood thing, but the major problem is that we've modified the gut microflora, and now it becomes the foods that people could tolerate before, they now can't tolerate. And food allergies have increased 50% between 1997 and 2011, for example. I mean, that's just the day before yesterday, and they've increased 50%. And it's because of antibiotics that's done it, and it's becoming generational. The grandma had antibiotics, and mum had antibiotics, and the child's had antibiotics, and all along the microbiome is getting more and more depleted. And we know that the microbiome not only controls the permeability of the gut, but it also controls the permeability of the gut-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier. And so toxins are getting across now into the brain that didn't get through before, and that's affecting the development of children's brains even. And so you've got now almost an epidemic of things like autism and ADHD and so on, you know. And it's thought by many scientists that it's all down to the sorts of bacteria we've selected for with antibiotics. And we could go into that autism thing in more detail if you want me to.
So we were mentioning before, or not before, but before we made this video, on how important is it for a mum to understand bacteria when they're giving birth?
Yes.
And caesareans, there's a big difference between natural births and caesareans.
That's right. A midwife told me more than a third of babies these days are born by caesarean, and half my 6 grandchildren were born by caesarean. And we know that caesarean babies, because they're not picking up their mother's microflora from the birth canal, which incidentally is the same as what's in the mother's bowel, then they are much more prone to food allergies, or allergies generally, and bowel problems generally. And so I know with my son, who's got the 3 caesarean kids, a few weeks back, I was over there and he said to his children, "Time for bed, have you taken your bugs yet?" So they have to have their probiotics every night. And it has reversed the asthma that the boys had, the eczema that the daughter had. It's reversed those things completely. So it's a good thing for children to have probiotics. It's a good thing for pregnant women to have a good probiotic. My daughter had diabetes, gestational diabetes, for her first 2 pregnancies, and she didn't take the formula that we're talking about. And for her 3rd pregnancy, she did take the symbiotic, and she had no problem at all with the 3rd one. So it's
Wow.
the proof of the pudding's in the eating, I guess. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, interesting.
So you're being blown away by this.
I'm being blown away.
So
That's it. At least I've got so many questions here, and it's the info's like, whoa, where do I go with this?
That's right. I mean, it is
We'll be for hours.
When you hear it for the first time, it is kind of mind blowing. I can see it stopping your train of thought.
Yeah, whoa. So I was going to say, so it's okay for kids to take a probiotic?
Absolutely. You just pro-rata it on a weight basis, and my rule of thumb is that for the product that we like to talk about, if you're trying to treat something in an adult, 2 or 3 doses a day is necessary. If you've just got good health and you're just trying to prevent things down the track, just like you would with your vitamins, then half to 1 dose a day is fine. With kids, if they're half the weight of you, give them half as much as you give yourself.
Okay.
They're quarter, give them a quarter, and so on. With babies, I wouldn't like to give them, if they're not weaned, then their gut isn't ready for fibre. It can constipate them if you give it them too early. But there is a sachet version that we talk about that you can just give them the culture side without the sachet, and we've seen it reverse things like colic in babies and so on. Anyway, that's...
Yeah, awesome. And so you're saying, is there a difference? Like, should people who train more at the gym, who are athletic, who do a lot of exercise, should they be taking more probiotics?
Well, that's a good question. And there is a paper that was produced by Professor Clancy, the immunologist, who was working with the acidophilus strain that we use, and he found that he could reverse chronic fatigue in overtrained athletes who had the Epstein-Barr virus in their system. In other words, they'd had glandular fever at some stage. And when people who've had that virus, and perhaps other viruses do the same sort of thing, when they stress themselves, as in training, then they can become, develop chronic fatigue, and he's found that strain will reverse that chronic fatigue. So there can be other causes for chronic fatigue, but one of the other causes is having too many bad bugs producing toxins that make people feel tired. Okay. And there again, if you can suppress those bad bugs, chronic fatigue can be reversed as well. And
when it comes back to you're saying with diet, so you're saying that people can be eating clean food, be eating super nutritious food, but because their gut bacteria is unhealthy, they're just not getting any benefit from
Absolutely, and that's a problem. These people are kind of between a rock and a hard place because they know they've got to eat good foods, and they can't get away with eating bad foods at all, not like some of us who can eat anything and it doesn't affect us. We might put on weight, but that's about it, Sure. And that's an exaggeration for effect, folks.
Everyone's different.
Everyone's different is what I'm saying. Everyone should have a good diet, all right? I'm not trying to promote bad eating habits, but I'm just saying that some people can get away with more than others can. And you often find that people who are attracted to this field are the people that can't get away with eating a whole lot of stuff. And they're drawn to this field because they've tried everything, they've had a good diet, they can't eat anything now, their food sensitivities have progressed to the point where all they can eat is potatoes and pears or something ridiculous. And they're not getting enough nutrition from their foods because their diet is so restricted. Hopefully we can give some of those people a way out of that dilemma. It can take some time to reverse the gut damage and bring back some tolerance for those foods, but it is possible to do.
Yeah. And what is the best analogy you could give someone to help understand this complex system, that we have? Yeah.
Your gut is an ecosystem, and I like to think of it just the same as your garden, for example. There is a natural balance that occurs in your garden. And most gardens will develop a lot of weeds. Some gardens are better prepared and don't have as much of a tendency perhaps to produce weeds. And people often say to me, how often do I have to take this probiotic, or how long do I have to take it for? And my question back to them is, how long do you have to weed your garden for?
Yeah.
You know, and the gut ecosystem bounces back to its natural balance if you stop weeding it, so to speak, with a very good probiotic. Just like your garden. Well, you know, when can you stop weeding your garden? Probably never.
Yeah. It's like going to the gym. You know, you don't just go for a month. You got to go.
Exactly. Everything goes backwards. You know, back to its natural chaotic state, if you like.
And what are some? Do we cover that already? What are some? What do we cover? Foods that kill bacteria. Do we cover that?
Oh no, we haven't. We haven't covered that.
Maybe we'll go into.
You kind of talked about liquids and fluids before.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wasn't specific about. It was more about dairy and that, and feeding the.
Okay, no, that's good.
Bad bugs.
What are some everyday?
Not specifically alcohol or diet focused though.
Okay.
You want to cover the sauerkrauts and things like that, or
That's down here in a little bit. Yeah. We'll do some everyday symptoms on the
So
unhealthy
does a healthy person that goes to the gym and eats well and has no gut problems need probiotics?
So does a person who eats healthy, goes to the gym, still need a probiotic? I think. Okay.
Well, I think we did cover that. I mean,
We sort of spoken about it.
It was with the
Went into the
athletes. I'll just be like, just to clarify. So just to clarify, John, should someone who's already eating healthy and also exercising, should they still take a probiotic?
well, it's a matter of that you could phrase the question: can people who do that get away with not having a probiotic? Okay, because most of us require or can benefit from a probiotic. Just it's the same as saying vitamins. You know, do people who eat healthily and exercise regularly need to take nutritional supplements like minerals? Well, the fact is Australia is a minerally deficient continent, so even if you eat the best possible food, you're not getting enough minerals.
Yeah.
So we have to import minerals and take mineral supplements. And, you know, some people can, we'll all do better if we eat well and exercise.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a given. But some people who've got very bad gut microflora can do all those things and still be sick as a dog.
Right.
And they're the people that benefit most. But we can all slide our experience up towards the good end by taking probiotics.
Right. Up to that 80%.
Yeah, we've just got to push it up to that end of the 80-20, you know, 80% good ones. And if we can push ourselves in that direction, then all these other things that we're talking about will benefit us more.
Yeah.
You know, you can, if you've got gut damage, you're not going to absorb your vitamins and minerals. That's a problem. A lot of people are taking vitamins and minerals, paying a lot of money for them, and they're just going straight through them because they've got gut damage.
Right.
So, good probiotic product will help you absorb all your vitamins and minerals, and then you'll start benefiting from those things.
Yes.
You see?
Excellent.
Yeah.
I love it. And what are some everyday symptoms people might be facing when it comes to bad bacteria and bad gut health? What are some symptoms?
The obvious ones up front are things like the gastric reflux, bloating, right, which are related. Then you get into things like diarrhea, which is basically the body pumping water into the intestine to try and flush out an irritating bug. All right? Constipation is another. This is an obvious one. Too many bugs that are producing neurotoxins, and neurotoxins will paralyse the nerves in the bowel, which is called the bowel brain. You've got almost as many nerves in your bowel as you've got in your brain, and when they get paralysed by neurotoxins, nerve poisons, then the peristalsis, that rhythmic contraction that pushes the food down, stops, and the doctor will say you've got a slow bowel. Right? Now, I had a doctor who was so constipated herself that she could only go once a month with the help of strong laxatives.
Wow.
Sorry, once a week, I should say. She'd be dead if she was doing once a month. Once a week. And she got onto this, a precursor of the products. We still actually manufacture this one. And she, after a couple of weeks, the nerves started to come back to life, and she started to go more and more regularly. And she said this at the end of a few months. She said, you've changed my life, you've fixed me. And then she said, the biggest problem we've got walking through the door, in other words, patients, is bowel problems, and we do not know how to treat them. Interesting, isn't it? Unwittingly, while they're trying to do good to people, Hippocratic Oath and all that, they're actually giving them antibiotics to cure a disease that they've identified. But ironically, it's actually damaging the gut microbiome and causing more problems
Long-term stuff
that they don't know how to treat then.
Yeah, and that was another one of my questions. What are some long-term symptoms that people could be facing?
There's all sorts of things that cascade out of that gut damage. There's the food sensitivities, there's the autoimmune diseases, for example, and there's over 110 of those. Even heart disease is thought to be autoimmune.
Wow.
And that happens when chlamydia pneumoniae gets into the bloodstream at high levels, and it's got on its surface a myosin mimic, a protein that looks like myosin in the human arteries. So there's the arteries with a myosin protein hanging out of it. Here's the chlamydia with a similar structure. Antibodies made against that then attack the same structure in you, and that's what starts plaque in the arteries. So even heart disease is basically triggered by gut problems, and we do know that if you've got gum problems, disease, that one of the biggest then causes of heart disease in this sort of cascade of processes that leads to heart disease is the gingivitis bug, which is Porphyromonas gingivalis, it's called. And so that is the number one bug that's associated with heart disease, and there's at least half a dozen that can cause problems. And so it's important to have that barrier intact in your gut. All those inflammatory conditions, even, I mean, if you're talking autoimmune diseases, you're talking diabetes, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. I suspect that even type 2 diabetes is, and we know that it can be helped. We've seen that reversed. All those inflammatory bowel diseases, we know that Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are caused by a bug that's related to the tuberculosis and leprosy bugs. It's got a fancy long name, Mycobacterium avium, comes from birds, I suppose, originally. Subspecies paratuberculosis, and that is the cause of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And so everything comes back to the gut bugs, you know, even the skin, even acne. You're talking about depression. If you've got an ongoing source of inflammation in your body, you are 50% more likely to suffer from major clinical depression because your brain gets inflamed. There is just no end to these flow-ons, and you know, you get presented with patients that have got so many things wrong with them, but they all track back to that one basic gut problem.
Right, so one variable.
Yeah.
And so much here. It's mind-blowing. Is there a link between poor gut bacteria and obesity?
Yes. It's interesting that in the American cattle industry, they used to, maybe still do, I don't know, fatten the cattle by giving them antibiotics.
Really?
Yeah. And it disrupts the gut microbiota, and it selects for bacteria that are extracting more energy from the food, and also perhaps slowing down the transit time in their gut and things like this, then allowing more energy to be extracted from the foods and so on,
right.
Which is then deposited as fat. But we know that people with, or let's say thin people, are more likely to have a bug called Christiansonella in their gut. And so there's a direct association. And we know that you can, if you give a trace amount of antibiotic to a mouse just after it's born, to the pup, then in mouse middle age, that mouse will be overweight.
Wow.
So it's there's an absolute connection between the two. And of course, if you're going to eat a lot of chocolate as well, on top of that, you know.
Yeah, it makes it worse. Okay. And I guess the same is with depression, you're saying.
Yeah.
The inflammation of the brain.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And also the anxiety, it's interesting that there's a lab strain of mouse that's pathologically anxious, and they can tell that it's pathologically anxious. They don't ask.
It's biting its nails.
Yeah, biting its nails. Biting his tail, maybe. I don't know about his nail. But they don't say, you know, are you anxious? Give us 1 squeak for yes and 2 for no. What they do is they put it on an elevated platform and give it a walkway that's got a sort of tightrope across to its food. And if it cowers in the corner, it's pathologically anxious, you see.
Right.
And what they do, they've taken poo from pathologically anxious mice, put it into normal mice,
And they get anxious.
and they get anxious.
Right.
And I always say, if someone came towards me with some poo from a pathologically anxious person, I'd get anxious too. But,
Yeah, totally.
but it is actually the gut
So
bugs.
emotions, fear,
Yeah.
anxiety.
Yeah, obsessive
Sadness.
compulsive disorder.
Wow.
Down to, they've actually been able to cause symptoms that are like, well, in humans, that cover the range of depression, anxiety, autism, and obsessive compulsive disorder, all these things in mice, by giving them antibiotics.
And I've heard they say apple cider vinegar is really good for improving
Yes.
gut health.
Yes, and I think that compounds in vinegar, of course the primary one is acetate,
Right.
and things like acetate, lactate, butyrate, all those fatty acid things, free fatty acids, all inhibit bad bacteria. But you see, a bifidobacterium will produce acetate as well, so it'll do it in the gut. But on top of that, it'll also produce butyrate, which feeds the cells that line the stomach, sorry, not the stomach, the intestine. And that's the only place, the intestinal lumen is the only place, in other words the bacteria in it, that those cells can be fed butyrate. They can't get it from the blood supply. So it's very important. Yeah.
But then again, a probiotic is way more powerful.
Yes, that's the
And-
way I look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good start, but
It's a good start, and there's nothing against drinking apple cider vinegar. I know my father-in-law drinks it, and he's 89 or something, so
Yeah.
can't be all that bad, that's for sure. And look, there's a lot of these natural remedies, and you're going to get onto things like the sauerkrauts and the kombuchas and the kefirs and things like that, and so I'd like to say a bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. We might just leave that to the next
Yeah.
video.
Oh, okay.
I've got one more question here. So today, starting right now, obviously probiotics is the best way to get started in terms of starting this journey to
Yeah.
improve the gut health.
Yeah.
I'll actually ask it as a question because then you just say that. We might just talk about. It's a bit chilly, isn't it? Yeah. And what's your thoughts on dairy and affecting the gut? Oh, have we already talked about that?
Yeah, we talked about
We spoke about
that.
that. Okay, cool.
Dairy and the nutrition value around it.
Should I talk about what improvements can people find?
Yeah, if you like. Yeah.
So yeah,
That's that question.
when it comes to the improvements people can start to feel and see as a result of taking a probiotic,
Yeah.
what would they include, do you think?
All right, now that's a good point and a good question. It leads into some other things that I'd like to say too. But firstly, if they're looking at, the gastric refluxes, the bloating, the diarrhea type of things, they should get a very rapid response from a very, very good probiotic.
Okay.
And I'm talking hours, not days. All right, you should see a result in it. Doesn't mean hours. And so if they don't get a result within hours or at least a few days, then you would start to suspect, and particularly if the symptoms got worse, you'd start to suspect that they had a protozoan parasite like a Giardia or a Blastocystis hominis or something like that. And in that case, antibiotics is the recommended treatment to get rid of those bugs. And so you then have to get tested by a doctor or naturopath, and they will make sure that those things are administered to you, and hopefully, and they're difficult to eradicate, but hopefully you can eradicate them. Then any damage that's done to your microbiome by the antibiotics, you can treat effectively with a good symbiotic, probiotic plus prebiotics.
So those improvements within a couple of hours or a couple of days is
Yeah, people.
feeling.
I heard one guy say that in 20 minutes he notices an improvement, but everyone's different, and it's a very subjective thing too. So it's very difficult to be precise about these things.
I noticed my sleep's improved, less cravings.
Yeah.
And when I do digest the food, it's just there's less irritation.
Yeah.
Which is
That's
good.
all consistent with what I would expect to
My
happen.
skin and stuff, like just cell,
Yes.
like my nails are stronger, hair's stronger, everything kind of just.
Do you normally have acne problems?
When I was younger, I had some acne.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's right, and acne can be positively affected by a good symbiotic. It's as if the immune system is so busy focusing on bad bugs in the gut that it hasn't got time to focus on the Propionibacterium acne that's causing the acne. We notice that skin clears up. I've had people say to me, I took it for my bowel problems and my skin cleared up. And there is a skin clinic that actually buys the product. So it does work, and things like thrush either orally or vaginally in ladies. There's a doctor that sends some patients to me all the time for treatment of that sort of thing. And it will affect it positively taking it orally, and you can even but a lady can put it on a tampon and insert it, and that can help there as well.
Interesting.
So all sorts of tricks.
Okay, and final question for the video: what can people do starting today to improve their gut health?
Right. Well, the main thing to do is to just take a probiotic, but it has to be the right one. Obviously, I can't recommend that you just go out and buy a probiotic, knowing how many there are on the market that have detrimental effects
Already.
So you've got to know which one to take, but that is the best thing to do for gut problems. And some people can have what's called a healing crisis. The more food sensitivities a person has, the more likely they are to have a Herxheimer reaction or healing crisis that could be due to bad bugs dying off quickly, releasing toxins, that sort of thing, or it could be due to other problems, but an adaptation process. And what I recommend there is they start low in the dose, maybe tip of a teaspoon if they're that sensitive. And people who can't take probiotics, if they start low like that, I've seen them be able to work up to a couple of spoonfuls a day, and it has dramatic impacts on their health then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Fantastic. I'm just blown away by this information, and I hope you guys are enjoying it at home. This is video 2 of 3. Check out the first video on an introduction. This is more of an in-depth discussion, and then we've got one more with even more fascinating discoveries on gut health. All around GMO, testing, and fermented foods. So again, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you got a lot out of it. Talk to you guys soon. See ya.
So yeah.